All right, so I'm going to take a moment to introduce RTS 23 now. I'm really motivated by this one, and I have been putting a lot of effort into this, and things have been tying together a lot of the loose ends that I had left open on RTS 22. But of course, it has to change some of RTS 22, so I'm probably going to be restarting from the beginning and extracting code fragments to pull in from it. Okay, so in this case, this is strongly about the visual goals of what I'm going to be doing, and you're seeing some examples of it right now. Now, this was created with Midjourney, which I have some very strong opinions on, and by all means, please feel free to check out the video on it, where I basically think most of it's illegal, and calling out my reasons why. But anyway, I'm trying to use this as responsibly as possible right now, which means I am having the AIs generate artwork that will not be going into any finished works. It will be used, this is being used as a template to tell myself what work I have to put in. I need to go create this art now. Reverse image. I need to go create that art now. Or I need to find people like you who might already have some skills in this area and would love to get involved. Particularly if this is the kind of stuff you can do, or you've got some pretty good ideas how to do it, please join in. I've got some ideas on how to do it. I'm pretty confident that I can. But everyone's got different experiences, and when it comes to the art effects, a lot of people can blow me out of the water pretty fast. So I'd love to get some people with more experience in the art side than me. Okay, so if you're interested, please feel free to join in. This is not funded. It is indie at this point, but I am going to be seeking funding several months down the road. Okay, so let's start with the concept. What is the concept of the game? Well, you basically have gigantic spaceships, battle cruisers that have been taken over by AIs. Wouldn't you know? So the ships are taken over by AIs, but the AIs also have a lot of, I forget the term, but they're just basically like passive AIs. These are ones that continuously try to upgrade the ship and maintain the ship and take in resources from asteroids and deal with asteroid damage and repair things up and reshape them as the ship needs to alter from time to time, depending on what it needs. So you have an entry to get into it. You can get into this ship by basically not carrying weapons. And it's not being into the ship. You're going to be on the surface of it. Think of it like 10 to 20 or 10 to 20 StarCraft maps. And then you can see them all at once. Well, you can see about 50% of them at any given time, because you can flip the ship over and see it all at the same time. 6 degrees of freedom, including in navigation systems. Okay, so there will be spies and misinformation. There's going to be creating battle plans that actually mean something for strategy and taking time to do it when you can. And then high-speed space battles and slower surface battles. I mean, real differences there. A lot of the ones where we're talking about, like in StarCraft and Dark Reign and other games where you have flying units and the ground units at the same time. You have a unit walking, and your fastest airship is only moving about 3 times as fast. Does that make sense? No. So I've got different approaches in this to deal with it. And then gravity is optional. This is in space. It's on the surface, but we could be approaching this from the way of like magnetic boots and treating it like it's there. But at the same time, if there's a dip in the ground, we can just walk over it and float without being able to change direction at all for a minute, which puts us at a very dangerous position if enemies appear, and then land on the other side. We can launch our units to other sides on here, especially if we give them any form of rockets to help redirect a little bit. Okay, so that's kind of the general concept. It is a massive battle with a massive scale, and it can be a long battle. Something where you might save and come back to this and spend 10 hours on one spaceship trying to win it, and maybe more. Okay, so let's start out. The ship is a massive map. The surface of the ship is a huge map. Now, when we're talking about art on how this is going to look, everything is going to be low poly simple models. I'm taking advantage of the low poly style to begin with, and I want to give this a really creative flavor to it. So the models are going to be simple. Like we'll use textures, but I'm talking about low poly textures where we might literally have no more than one color per triangle. Not where we'll try to fit in a whole bunch more details within the triangles, or by hiding it into the art. So simultaneous visuals, faster spaceship battles, slower surface battles that we'll be needing to be able to identify activities and what's going on. So we'll have to have ways of looking at that. We'll get into that one in a second. And potentially things under the surface. I'm still questioning this one and how it will work, and I'm more and more starting to lean towards cutting that one out of this version. IDing squads and targets. Again, we'll get into this one in a minute with this last section. But 6 degrees of freedom for a navigable surface. I am talking about using Unity's experimental nav mesh system, which has already proven it can do multi-dimensional navigation. And so I am going to be taking advantage of that. I'm planning on writing some utilities to take the low poly version of the ship and effectively custom attach the navigation planes to it. All right, so 6 degrees of navigable surface. Let's move on. Low poly art splash. Okay, again, emphasis on low poly simple models with the effects, where the effects are what's giving it its richness and its color and its design. I mean, look at this. So let's take a look at some of this. Explosions in paint powder. Literally, you've seen the paint powder or cloud explosion puffs in pictures, how kind of entrancing that is. I want to pull that in here, and that's a perfect candidate for something like a dither effect. So we're going down to the pixel-based instead of transparencies. And that's going to give us a lot of performance boost when we're talking about seeing a lot of these effects at once on the field. When we're talking about damage in particle plasma and lightning branches, we have physical areas of damage associated with a ship or associated with one of the machines or crafts. And that is information. How do we deal with that? That's going to be partially particle driven so that we have some interaction with the physical model. So it actually looks like this is related. But then, and visuals in bloom. But then also one other key thing is that I want to avoid lighting and shadows. But a lot of the quality of the artwork, especially when you're talking about low poly, still comes from that lighting and that shadows to give it its rich effects. We're going to be using custom shaders to deal with this stuff. And rather than having so much in the way of light to be able to present this information in shadows, we're going to be using color and effects. So we know that there's blue arcs of lightning going across this in various points. We also know those points. That information can be passed into the shader. Let's do it. Let's use it. This also means that when we start to get to a smaller level of detail, a higher level of detail, and we're farther away from the objects, that some of the code, the C# side that's going to be pushing these effects, also needs to understand that and back off. So we cut off processing when we start getting to very large scale items, and that needs to be separated out. And when we take screenshots in the game of actual gameplay of what you're seeing inside and out, this is a great example of what I'd like to see. I think this is probably higher poly than what I'm planning on for anything. And same thing, like I'm using Midjourney to create the art, the art AIs to create this stuff, so I'm not getting exactly what I want. I'm using this as examples to kind of lead there. This one is really close for the type of effects that are happening on it. This one's pretty close for the way that the surface map might look, though I'm planning on simpler than this so that we don't overextend the navigation meshes. The more different surfaces it has to work with, the more expensive that's going to get. All right. No, back here. And then over here, we got those effects. Finally, info at a glance is the last key part of it. So this game, we're talking about information and misinformation. When you take a first glance at a unit, you don't know if that unit's carrying a rocket launcher, if it's carrying a laser cannon, if it's carrying bombs, if it's just carrying communications equipment so it can see farther around and transmit that information back. You don't know what it carries. It's like a soldier in the field. What's in their backpack? You can kind of make guesses and ideas, but you have to start gaining intel about what these different units have and what they're moving around and doing stuff with. And that's what I want to use in this. I want to actually keep the number of types of weaponry, the types of things that a unit could potentially do, to be a very low manageable number to understand in your head very quickly. But it's not going to present itself through the art. Instead, we're going to be using icons. And these icons, after you have verified by way of spies, by way of satellites, by way of other forms of infiltration or observation, you start to identify that certain units have certain abilities. And because of that, when they're on the field now and you see that unit, it has icons over it. Or you see a squad of 20 units, it carries icons over it, indicating that some of the units in here have bombing firepower. Some of the units in here have laser cannons. Some of the units in here have long-range sensors. One of the units in there is a spy that just pretends to do the stuff that they're being ordered to and pretends to be an enemy unit. Okay. So how we're going to present that information becomes its own challenge to itself. So we're going to be using things like Bezier curves. We're going to be using lines or broken lines to start snapping points together and identifying certain things in certain areas. What activities are going on, where things have been seen, potentially layer maps to help identify and showcase different pieces of information at the same time. But then we also have this panel in the back, which basically is saying, oh yeah, there's another side of the ship. We can rotate that ship around and look at it from the other side, and there's a whole nother area full of units and battles and tech and whatever's happening inside of the game. So that information that can't point to something yet because we don't have a line of sight with it can show up over here. And so we've got this great information panel to be able to design and develop too. Some of this is going to be developed based on systems like force graph or very lightweight forms of force graph. Some of it might be based more on web. Maybe we'll even take this one particular panel and import an HTML and CSS type translator to process how that page and information gets oriented. There's a lot of stuff that we could be doing in here, and I would love to get ideas and concepts. So by all means, please feel free to comment on this, add, contribute to this. If you feel you have a skill set that you can apply to this, I am accepting indie support at this time with the plans of moving forward financially to gain financial support at a later date. I have specific times in mind, but I'm not planning on sharing that out yet. So by all means, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will talk to you guys later on this. Thanks.